All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our panel. I want to take a moment to thank my great panel. We got Andrew from Vercel, Tobin from WorkOS, and then we have Sterling from Postman. And really, one of the things before we start, we started an MCP server builder series community. It's on Luma MCP-server. And we started having events in SF, New York, and it's really in the spirit of sharing our learnings of how we're building in agents and MCP. And really the only way I think we're going to get there is by really what we did in kind of our other builder communities with mobile and web, similar in this world. So a big thanks. Everyone here has actually been at all of these meetups. We got Andrew actually going to be talking at the next one. And Sterling actually talking next one. We've been having Postman and WorkOS and everybody at a bunch of them. So why don't we jump into it? I think one of the things I've noticed a lot in the MCP community is there's a lot of people building agents, but the agents are kind of turning into this, what some people call AI slop. You know, some agent builds a thing, gets it maybe right 80% of the time, 20% of the time fails. Then another agent picks up some work coming out of that, and it starts to spiral out of control. And it's more of like we're building agent to workflows. So, you know, what is the next level? What is the next thing coming in agents? Andrew, I know you've written a lot about this. Why don't we start with you?
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, I think there's a lot that's happening in the agent space. A lot of it seemingly looks like good prototypes, but also a lot that are nearing production readiness. At Vercel, we're building a lot of agents internally. Some include a firewall observability agent. So you can think of when you are getting a DDoS attack or when your edge requests are spiking. This agent will actually take that chunk of data, the requests, the ASNs, the IPs, and it'll analyze to try to figure out what may be causing this anomaly. And so that's a very actionable agent that will prevent your on-call engineer from needing to even wake up. And we've also looked at other things like code review, data science, and there's a lot of internal functions that we're trying to experiment with to see what we could show as references for new agents to be built. I think maybe Tobin has some thoughts too.
Yeah, I'm also curious as to, when you're looking to build an agent, I can suspect I know where you're hosting it, but what kind of stack do you go to when you think to build an agent?
Funny enough, you can actually build it all on Vercel. Not to sound like a shill. But we have this AI SDK that makes it very easy to load in tools, do sub-agents, do parallel calling, and sort of orchestrate the whole flow that you want. For the data science agent, we actually started building with just a single prompt, loading all the schemas into memory, and just hoping it generated valid SQL. And then through some more vibes, through some more evals, we were able to create sub-agents, create like a whole list of like 20 tools that get split into different phases of planning, building, execution, and reporting. And it's been working really well so far.
So it's interesting. So like Postman's got our Postman flows, which is, if you haven't used it before, we originally started to build it, use it to build like flows, like agentic, or just build workflows. Now we're building agent and agentic workflows. And it's similar because when we talk about agents, we're talking about, like, it's always a linear experience. Like, oh, well, I want to do this, then this. That's not an agent, that's an agentic workflow. But Postman's got something similar. And it's interesting to see all these different tools that are coming out that we're all calling it agent. And I think that's a little bit, you know, we talked like AI slop. It's like, not everything is an agent. Let's be honest.
Like the OpenAI agent builder.
For context, we were talking about backstage. I was testing it thoroughly on Monday and not impressed. It's still very rudimentary, but with Postman flows, you can get fine-grained tuning. You can take an API response, modify it, do something with it, pass it into the next step, and then you can build an agent out of it. You can take, we have a create with AI block where you can actually build more and let an AI make a decision on the fly. So I was less than impressed, but that's I'm obviously going to be biased.
Well, and to riff off that, so that is the like workflow version of an agent, because these things are so over-defined.
Yeah.
But then they also released the app SDK, which is a wrapper on MCP that lets you, in your chat session, interact dynamically with an external service, which is a completely different and loosely related version of an agent, which I actually think was pretty cool and a nice user experience.
I haven't played with it yet. I've just been reading the blogs.
Yeah, I think of MCP UI. Like when I first saw that, MCP UI is a project that's gotten a lot of adoption. Goose actually supports MCP UI too.
Postman supports it.
And Postman supports it, yeah. And I think there's a lot of, actually, I feel like every week there's like someone else supporting it. But the idea of having dynamic UIs and being able to bring that stuff together, I think is definitely a direction we're going. But with that, I think we're all here talking about like our APIs and how we can build tools that power these agentic experiences. And I think everyone agrees APIs are somewhere in that tool space, but we all have these API strategies. And how are our APIs strategizing, or how are you seeing APIs strategies evolve with this new agentic world? What about you, Sterling?
You have to. APIs traditionally been made for humans. I mean, up until a couple years ago, that's what it was. And so your docs live somewhere else. You have all the context in your brain. Like as a software engineer, I know that an internal API or an internal service has intrinsic info. I have that knowledge inside of me. But we have to take that knowledge and get that out of our heads and onto somewhere that an AI has access to. So when we're thinking about how to rebuild or how do we readdress and look at APIs, the more important thing for me is who is our new consumer? Who is that consumer? Let's add better error handling. I mean, we'll talk REST. I love GraphQL. I love gRPC. Like a lot of the protocols, Postman's got them all, got most of them actually. But all of these various API protocols have the same or have very similar things. We all have error states. Well, if an agent doesn't know how to handle the error, it's just, oh, well, it failed. What the hell does fail mean, right? No, it failed because, and you add all that extra context in there, an LLM or an agent isn't going to go and read your documentation like a human would. And so we have to start building, and it's funny I was thinking about this earlier, we have to be better at our APIs. Our APIs have to be more perfect. And a piece of advice I've given to others, and I'd love to hear your opinions, but a piece of advice I've shared with quite a few people at Postman is my first step to seeing if my API is ready for an LLM is actually just throw the entire spec at the LLM and say, given all the error states, given all this, can you read this? What happens if it fails? And if the LLM doesn't come back with a good response, okay, now we're gonna go and fix that.
Yeah. I would riff on that. You said APIs used to be for humans, now they're for AI. I think in particular they used to be for developers. It used to be a sophisticated user that could think about what was involved in doing a GraphQL query. And now MCP, the vision of that for consumers, is an API for consumers to use. And that is a very different user experience to design around. There's also the ultimate use case where you have these flexible agents in the enterprise where they can do a bunch of different stuff all together. Maybe Andrew can talk about how the vision of building better MCPs and what that means, and how you need to redesign APIs around that.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I agree with both of you, how APIs were first designed for a different target audience than what MCPs were. Fun fact, if y'all search up on Google right now, the second wave of MCPs, you may find a Vercel blog post I wrote recently that details specifically this exact phenomenon, how LMs aren't necessarily good at reasoning about when to chain together certain API calls. And so then there's this new wave of intent-based workflows. Notion has recently re-architected their MCP server around this same sort of idea, where not a lot of people want to just fetch a document. Not everyone wants to just get a block. It's a lot of more chained, more full workflows that you should give the LM to do, and be very prescriptive about what you're doing. Don't assume that it could do everything just magically.
So what you're saying is we can't just wrap all of our APIs around an MCP server, which is traditionally what's been happening.
Yes.
Every company I know is like, oh, well, here's all of our APIs, here's all of our externally facing APIs. We're just going to wrap this in an MCP server and call it that.
Exactly. That was the first wave. Now we're on the second wave.
Yeah, I even think of when I first started looking at it, I was like, oh, well, let's just take our website and take all the operations it has and just turn those into tools. But like the shape of a lot of those operations were designed for the website, not for what the experience is there. And you start thinking about fields that don't make sense in the agentic world that's in web. And it's also one of the reasons I love GraphQL with our tools, because it's pretty easy to adjust. And I think the MCP server should really be a thin layer that is really focusing on what are the tools that enable a workflow versus like, here's an API endpoint, I could do this thing. Let's give a filterable search tool to an LLM.
Exactly. A very, I guess, tangible example is that for the first version of the Vercel MCP, we had all these tools like get project, get deployment, get people on project, get team. And it's actually a very linear process. It first needs to get the team, then it gets the project, then it gets the deployment from that project, and then it gets the logs. So we just wrapped all that into one single tool for figure out deployment issues. And turns out the LM is really good at passing in 4 very static inputs rather than 4 different times.
I think that's, not to harp on like agent builder, but that linear effect, that's how humans we've traditionally done it, right? We build a workflow, it's when this happens, now do this. If this, then that. And with an LLM, with AI, with agents, they can do a lot more. And it's one of the reasons why I love GraphQL. And one of my first tests with MCP, I was telling Watson about this backstage, is one of my favorite things is I took a graph that I knew had subgraphs with the information I wanted. And I just said, I had introspection turned on, and I said, here it is. Go, I want this information. Knowing in my experiment that those were all very, like the information was nested very, very deep. And the LLM was able to say, oh, great, I'll put together the fragments, here's what it is. And now all of a sudden it was able to do all of that on its own without me having to give it those directions. If we treat agents as we treat a software engineer, I think we're looking at agents as a mid to senior level engineer. I wouldn't, we riffed on this earlier, but I wouldn't give a senior engineer keys to the kingdom, right? We talked, I saw the keynote earlier where we've all heard this, where someone made their agent deleted their prod, or their database in prod. That was on, I'll call it out, that was on Replit, not on Vercel. I wouldn't give the keys to the kingdom. And so I think wrapping those agents around, like retooling our APIs, so instead of having 4 APIs, you have 1 API or 1 tool that does all 4. That's a much stronger and a better approach to building agents.
So I agree with both of you, but I'm going to disagree just to spice up this discussion, which is the AI models are the worst they're ever going to be at tool calling right now. They're only going to get better from here. And so there are instances where instead of using MCP tools designed around intent, which is a more flexible way of doing things, you can just give it raw access to capabilities like GraphQL queries or SQL queries. And models can be really good at dynamically running interesting queries to figure out what they're trying to do. And that is kind of a different approach, significantly less secure, but a different approach to building MCP servers.
It is. I know we were going to talk about security anyway, so I don't want to tee this up, but I don't think that's that spicy of a take either. It's why I like GraphQL. I think GraphQL is a really strong, if I combine GraphQL and MCP, I think that's a stronger output than traditional just REST. And I think that's something that even at Postman and a lot of us are talking about is we have to reimagine our the entirety of the last 30 years. We've done all of this for humans, for developers, but when we're thinking about APIs, when we're thinking about MCP, when we're thinking about agents, this is a whole new world. And so I also talk about this as we got to throw the playbook out. We've had all these playbooks here's, if you're a new engineer, here's what you're going to do. No, throw that out. a junior engineer starting their path today is going to be vastly different than a junior engineer 5 years ago. So
this is also why Claude Code is so good. It only has access to Bash, essentially. And it can discover what capabilities are installed on the machine, how to explore a various command with different arguments. So if it's a free-form system like SQL, like Bash, I think LMs are really good at it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because I mean, even in the demo, you see like Claude was running Bash and like doing a bunch of different commands, like kind of as it was planning and getting through the process. And like the way we built the GraphOS MCP server, you know, the primary tool in there is that connectors spec, and it's really very purpose-built of teaching an LLM how to do a very specific thing of like, I'm trying to build a graph with Apollo connectors. And I think that's a great example of where you could have a bunch of generic tools, but like really that tool paired with a generic tool like reading our docs. Now we can embed understanding of what our doc structure is inside of that connector spec, and those tools now work really well together, and the LLMs, it gets that. Like that type of stuff, it's really, really good at. I love that. But you know, behind all this is the elephant in the room, which is security. Right? There's a lot of people here that are building platforms, and you probably are having AI teams go around your platform. Maybe you're talking to the subgraphs directly, breaking all the rules to ship, you know, today. Why is security so hard for agents? Like, they're supposed to just be people, right? I mean, like, invisible people. So why is it so hard? Tobin, like, you've talked about this a lot.
Yes, and to the point where while we're shilling reports, I just had a new big 30-page white paper from the OpenID Foundation on this topic. And we've all hired interns before. Interns can do catastrophic things in your infrastructure if you let them have access, so you don't give them access. But in turn, interns are kind of useless, right? Because they don't have the ability to push things to production, to make really great PRs and merge them. And the vision of AI being so powerful to unlock all these workflows is you need to give it access to stuff. But it's also highly non-deterministic and can operate at a speed that you just can't monitor what's going on. When I'm using Claude Code, it just randomly p-kills random processes in my computer. It's running all manner of bash commands. And I do it in skip dangerously permissions, the YOLO mode. I can't be bothered actually waiting for, you know, to check in on everything. And so that means you need to be really careful about how you design these systems and what you give them access to.
you have to add, I'm going to riff off that a little bit. You have to give them the guardrails. And if I have an expectation that this agent is going to be writing code for me, I'm going to have to make sure that it's within the spec that I do. So one of the workflows that I've started to adopt on my own is like for vibe coding. I'm back into the whole vibe coding thing. I know we're gonna this is my new favorite thing. I'm formerly a software engineer, turned engineering manager, turned DevRel. So I've been away from code for 5 or 6 years, and trying to get back into it has been so much more fun with these vibe coding tools. But what I do now is I'll go in and brainstorm with ChatGPT. It's like, here's what I want to build, and I create a project plan out of it. Then I go to Claude Code, or then I go to Claude Desktop and say, this is going to Claude Code. Give me a full project plan for this. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, then I'm also adding those guardrails inside of my project plan. Mm-hmm. Don't do this. Mm-hmm. Here's the tech stack I'm going to use. Inevitably, it's going to be Vercel, Railway. It's going to, if I'm doing Pinecone or Supabase, if I'm going to do anything agentic with RAG. But I'm very, very clear of what you can't do. And so I don't let it kill any of the other processes. Mm-hmm. It's if it goes and tries to build something, and it's like, oh, well, localhost 3000 is busy. Yeah, I know. One of my MCP servers is using 3000. So go to the next one. Don't kill anything. Yeah. So making sure we add those guardrails and prevent AI from just running amok. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not going to give an intern that. I'm not going to give an intern the keys to the kingdom.
For sure. And I also think that MCP is somewhat overrated overall. I think there's hot take. But I think
you're talking to all of us who love MCP.
Click the eject button.
I think there's two sides of the equation, right? Either you own the client and you want to let people bring their own external functionality, so then you're OpenAI, then you would support MCP. Or if you were building the agent, but you don't have control of the integrations, in that case, use MCP on the other side to bootstrap some of these tools needed. But if you're actually building your own system, your own automation, your own agent, I see very little reason to actually use MCP here. You control both the integration side and you control the client that interacts with it. So for example, for the data science agent, I started by connecting with the Snowflake MCP. And that actually led to ingesting dozens of tools that were not necessary for just executing a single query. And so then we would vendor that one tool via this thing we have, MCP to AI SDK. And then we eventually, as we build this agent, we do more testing, we make sure it works. We'd rather just stub out that MCP call for an actual tool call. So we actually completely control the flow rather than relying on a third-party service that could change at any moment, could break, and let alone also exfiltrate some data from this agent that's running.
Yeah,
as hot of a take as that as you wanted that to be, I actually find that I agree with you on that to a certain degree. MCP is a really, really powerful layer, but when we're starting to build really truly agentic workflows, or agents, there's a point where I do want to be very prescriptive. This is the only tool you have access to. And so, but I don't think MCP was ever meant to be as deep and as wide as it is now. And I don't think that's a problem with MCP. I don't think that's anything aside from we're all learning these new technologies and we're trying to see we are all pushing the boundaries ourselves.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy that you can just change a remote MCP server. There's no concept of versioning for MCP servers in the way there is with APIs. And because language models are flexible, you can just change an MCP server and it'll figure out how to use the new updated server, which is a huge security risk. Right? You're just connected to these platforms that can rug pull you.
I mean, they call this runtime discovery of feature.
No, it is super powerful. You never have to version your APIs anymore. It just figures it out. But security risks.
With flows, it's interesting. So I've done some demos on this, and you can go to my YouTube channel and you can watch it. One of the things with flows is that you do have the ability to version an MCP. So with flows, it's a graphical interface where you can it's like blocky stuff, where you can bring on an API block, modify, when the response comes in, pull specific pieces out of that response, pass that to, the next chain in the event or next chain in the workflow. But then you do have the ability to deploy that workflow as an MCP server, and you can version it. And I think that's the security, that's a huge security risk for all of us, is if you don't have versioning. I hate going to an MCP server. Number of times I've opened up Claude Code or even Claude Desktop, and I see that red mark, that red thing comes up. This dev tool is not working, the MCP is not working. Okay, this is a remote MCP server that someone broke and I can't use it anymore.
So I also think this vision of security you're describing and workflows ties into how people build agents and what that vision looks like. I work for an enterprise security vendor that helps with these connective tissues. We think a lot about SSO, provisioning of identities, deprovisioning, security monitoring. And I really like the goose model that they preach of you give your employees from bottom up access not only to a chat client, some kind of AI client, but internal servers via MCP, internal APIs via MCP, that allows them to automate what they're doing. And it just makes them more efficient because now they can use a chatbot to help make things really fast. And when you notice time and time again, you're rerunning the same prompt with the same MCP servers, then you can go from that simple use case with synchronous MCP use to a workload, to a workflow that might still use the same MCP servers to make it easy. It might just move to tool calling and make it custom built. But regardless of what that looks like, I think having a sense of security, who's using what, who has access to what MCP servers are tied to what users, matters along that whole chain of development.
Yeah, that graduation you talked about is exactly why we built this MCP vendoring tool. We had an internal use case where we want a AI PM, and so we end up connecting Notion, Linear, and a few other tools via MCP servers to this agentic loop we had. And it was performing okay, but then we realized that it was using up so many tokens, even though we only needed just create document as well as list ticket right? We only needed those two tools. And so we would vendor them in for convenience and then eventually substitute them out for direct tool calls.
Yeah, I agree with so many things that were said in all of that. I've actually found in a lot of the MCP servers, what I showed in the demo of kind of vibe coding the connectors, I've actually found just connecting to certain APIs for the thing I want, making an individual tool for what I need is actually just easier and faster too. And like, we definitely have to have guardrails on this. For everyone in the audience, if you're going to try out a Apollo MCP server, it's default configured to not do mutations. You have to explicitly configure that for that reason, right? We need to put guardrails on. And you should use persisted queries. Some people call them trusted documents too, but do that. That's a great security thing that will help. Don't let production LLMs run whatever queries they want. They will take stuff down. It's happened. Okay, so we are going to let some questions. There's 2 mics here. If you have a question or something, I'm going to do one more question, and then we're going to take it to the audience. So think of your questions now if you have any. But I have one question that I want to ask you all. Since we were talking, this is about kind of developer experience for these agents, this new world of what we're building in. What is your favorite tool that you've used for agentic development that isn't coming from your company?
Oh, crap.
Yeah, this is a good one. And I'll tell mine too, and I'll start. Mine actually is Goose. I really, really enjoy Goose. From a DevRel standpoint, I switch between a lot of models. And so like I use Bedrock sometimes I'm using Claude Code, Cursor, OpenAI. I love that I can configure any provider inside of that. And I really love the lead worker model that they have in there. So I can say like, oh, I want to use Sonnet 4 for my lead model, and then I want to use 4.0 Mini for my worker model. So like with the connectors thing, I've done a lot of experimentation of having sub-agent processes that implement a domain design that came from that lead worker. So I just love that. I feel like Goose is one of the agents that's helping me save money with what they're doing with context tokens in that model. And I just really like that. Also, shout out to Alex, who is from the GraphQL community, who builds the desktop client, who I did a podcast with Square. So if you look on the webs, you can find that. But definitely Goose for me. What about you, Sterling?
Well, I can't use Postman. And it's funny because I've talked a lot about Postman up here. I'm a Postman fanboy even before I started working at Postman, and I love what we do. My favorite for all of it, I mean, it's Vercel. And I'm not saying that because Andrew's on stage. I'm not saying that I've loved Vercel for so long, and I see that they're adapting to this agentic era in a way that other companies aren't. So it sounds like I'm not trying to. It's awkward, but
it's okay.
There's a whole lot of love for Vercel coming from me.
I love you too, Sterling.
But yeah, that would be mine. It sounds like we're all just advertising for our own companies up here, but that's not the intent.
I didn't pick any of your companies, so that's okay. Don't worry.
I love Postman. Heard it here first.
Yeah, and I'm not supporting either of you. For workflows, I find the biggest challenge, especially for tool calling and not MCP. MCP has this quirk of dynamic client registration, which means you can kind of connect it to anything, which is really powerful. But if you want to do traditional tool calling or like these structured integrations, the most painful part in an enterprise is procurement. It's like you just need an IT admin to allow access to your Gmail for whatever workflow you're trying to do, which is genuinely really annoying and a blocker in lots of situations. And so mine that I go to time and time again is Zapier, just because Zapier already has access to essentially everything I need it to do. And for simple workflow automations that use a little language model inside of there, it's really, really nice. There are many other examples like N8N and lots of agent building platforms, but
OpenAI Agent Builder.
OpenAI Agent Builder.
Postman flows.
But they don't have access, and that's inconvenient, and I'm lazy. And then if you're building an MCP server, I am a huge fan, I was going to say Andrew's MCP handler, but I'm not going to, of Fast MCP from Prefect, Fast MCP 2.0, not 1.0, not the core SDK. It is super clean. It's so easy to go from 0 to a shipped MCP server just within 15 minutes. Robust auth. We have a auth partnership to them to have really gold standard enterprise auth built in. It's really robust.
I think it's cool if you like Python. But not many people.
And if you're a TypeScript person, MCP handler, which is a thin wrapper on the TypeScript SDK, but optimizes it for fluid compute and all the other Vercel magic.
Yeah, I love the mention of Zapier and these workflow builders. I've been trying a lot out as well, including Glean, which it has all of the company data already, so it makes sense to build a workflow builder within Glean.
Glean agents, though, kind of sucks.
For sure.
They got to support MCP. Glean, if you see this, please put MCP support in. I have a lot of servers I'm trying to connect our Glean, and I can't.
But that to say is, Glean is not my pick. Slightly breaking your question, but we actually have someone internally really cracked who's building a Claude Code browser. So you imagine right now if you use Claude Code vanilla, it's just a single terminal pane. And there's all these apps like Conductor, like Imbue, that try to let you spin up multiple in parallel. But he actually built a browser that is both terminal embedded with a browsing window. And so as you're developing multiple Claude codes in parallel, you can preview them live and switch between tabs like any other browser, but they're all different dev environments.
Whoa, very cool.
And so this makes my computer spin so loud.
Yeah.
But it's super powerful when you need to juggle multiple repos and multiple different apps at the same time.
Yeah, is this all locally run Claude Code, or are you doing
all locally?
background?
Yeah, he built a whole Chromium browser that embeds your terminal.
When can we play with this?
I would love to get this guy open source it. It's so cracked, and it's completely dark mode as well.
Good.
Every page is like rounded to dark mode, even if it doesn't support it.
Claude for Claude's Chrome extension is also really good. It's very slow to click various things, but as these systems get better, I really like that it can both run code, connect to MCP servers, and use the browser when it needs to as a fallback.
Yeah, I mean, those are great ones. I also, as you were saying some things, I thought of one other tool that I really like, Smithery. Smithery is really good from a development workflow of trying to figure out, one of the things I always have a struggle with is it's like I would need to ask a question, and then I want to see what the tool choices and interactions are and switching between models, and that's why I like Goose. But Smithery helps me a lot in the dev workflows around that, and it just make it really easy to connect.
Big fan.
Yeah.
Also, I have a question for you, Tobin, directly. What do you think about observability and authentication when it comes to agents? I
mean, this is part of it is just you've always needed robust auth and robust observability in whatever you build. If you're not using that, you're doing something wrong. The thing about agents is just that the scale and speed can get so much higher. You can just have all these workflows that are interacting with external parties, connecting to things. And so you need really scalable, robust identity tooling, observability tooling. You want to know what's going on and make it really safe. Also, I want to put in one extra thing. Anyone building MCP who's using the inspector, the official inspector, kind of sucks and introduces random bugs all the time. But MCP Jam is a new startup in the SF area that has a really nice inspector.
Are you sponsored?
No, but he is a good friend.
Oh, that's great. I actually haven't heard of that one. I want to check that one out.
We'll text.
Yeah, we'll chat. Actually, a funny story, our first MCP event, we wanted to have an MCP server for our community. And Tobin came and talked at it, and his talk was DDoSing our MCP server live, which was fun. It was great. We didn't have auth support yet, but then we put WorkOS in, and I was like, all right, hack that now. So all good. Okay, so we're gonna open it up for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please step up to the mic. I don't see anyone lining up. I see maybe some movements. No.
We also have pre-seeded questions. Am I right?
We do. Oh, I see someone coming up. So
make it hard for us.
I'll try. What are your guys' thoughts on the MCP gateways and basically solving one problem with multiple MCP servers behind the gateway. Any examples of you guys have implemented such a thing? What are the limitations and problems that you have faced?
So as a auth and security and entry point vendor, we both provide a reverse proxy that powers a bunch of gateways. We are the auth solution for a bunch of different products in this space. I think it's a very natural point to do enforcement of guardrails and protections. If you are selling into an enterprise, gateways make a lot of sense. They can be auditability points, they can be observability points, they can make sure you have a centralized identity check. One note that I'll have is you should probably have a separate gateway for your MCP stuff as you would for other APIs that you're going to use, just because to support all the robust tooling you need in an auth gateway for MCP, you introduce security risks like through dynamic client registration, and so you just kind of want to separate those two out. But I think it's a really useful touch point for a lot of people.
I agree. I actually, when thinking about MCP gateways, I know this wasn't necessarily the question, but I want to kind of go into that. Is I would implement an MCP gateway at the same time or at the same point in your app building lifecycle as you would an API gateway. So when I need, I'm building a proof of concept and I'm building an MVP, I'm not going to put an API gateway there, nor am I going to put an MCP gateway. But once I get to there's a certain threshold, and that's going to be very not defined by anyone except for you as the developer or the company. When you get to that point, you're like, there's an inflection point at some point, you're going to need to bring in an MCP gateway. So I'm a huge advocate of MCP gateways. I like gateways as a whole.
I mean, I do think you could also start your development with MCP gateways from the get-go. I'm not affiliated, but Speakeasy has an amazing new product called getgram.io. It lets you, Speakeasy is an SDK generator. You plug in the WorkOS or Postman or GraphQL SDK, and you get back a type-safe Go, TypeScript, PHP, whatever library. And since they have this large library of libraries, they can actually generate MCP servers tailor-made, chaining across SDKs. So for the example I had before about the AIPM, you can actually use their gateway to assemble this workflow, and then you just invoke their singular MCP server, and it will be auth to your workflow, and it'll also have access to all these other tools under the surface. So I think that is a very emerging behavior of customizing these workflows in a no-code way.
Yeah. I also think it makes sense that there's a bunch of constraints on MCP, like the fact you can't have too many tools right now, or it overloads the context window. And connecting to each new service is really annoying because you've got to click a bunch of connect buttons, do a bunch of OAuth flows. And so having a gateway that centralizes that and can control what is accessed at different times can be really powerful as a development experience.
What's that number again? Number of tools?
Varies.
28?
It varies by client in a way that I don't know why they're different for different clients, but every client developer's just picked it up.
I'm pretty sure it's money in tokens. Pretty sure that's the change. I mean, I definitely agree. I think one of the things that I see a lot in API gateways, it kind of comes down to what you end up needing to do. So I often talk about bring your own agent, which is this concept that at the enterprise level, they make a decision like, oh, we use GCP, so we're doing Gemini. So the agentic experience that a majority of the internal people are using are based off of that, right? And so in those worlds, a lot of platform teams are talking about how do we create a toolbox for the organization. But the toolbox, it quickly gets to the point of what Andrew's saying. I don't want half those tools for what I'm trying to do. And it's okay that I can toggle them on and off, but that's it's annoying. Right, and I think a natural direction that's going for a lot of this is having the tool list call that's happening from an MCP server should be dynamic based on your RBAC and what your auth is, right? Here's this user, they have access to these tools, and that probably also needs some additional context that's a personalization level, right? Oh, I have these tools, but these are actually the tools that I typically have enabled by default or something. I have a personalization aspect inside of that. That's definitely what a lot of the Apollo customers working with Apollo MCP have been starting to talk about. We have collections of tools like this organization, marketing has a marketing set of tools, and how do we, keep those boundaries because like marketing doesn't care about the tools from this org over here, right? So having a toolbox that just gives you all the tools, that doesn't make sense, right? So I think the gateways have like solutions that are inside of there. And then when you get on the outside of the build your own or bring your own agent, that's where you're like building your agent. To Andrew's point, you know, there were a lot of people building agents before MCP. And really what I think MCP did is it just really standardized what that tool response of a chat completion endpoint should be. And a lot of times what I talk about, you know, the tools you put into that chat completion call can be dynamic. And a lot of times, like you might get a list of tools, but you could cut out half those tools and only send like what tools you want to that chat completion. So one of the things that I think has been very challenging in understanding how to orchestrate tools, all this stuff, a lot of the early things that came out just wrapped up everything so easy that you're like, what's going on? Like with LangChain, I had so many times where I'm trying to unwrap what it's doing. And it's magic, but then also you can't take magic to production because then people start asking questions and you're like, well, I don't really know actually. And it gets a little strange. So I think it's a world that's evolving more, but I think no matter what, everyone's kind of coming to this realization there's this abstraction layer that's needed. And you know, this kind of gateway architecture is what everyone's leaning into in that. But please don't make me have more AWS API gateways.
No. Jeez.
I had a follow-up to that.
Yeah, could you just speak into the mic so we get for the recording?
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks. No, it's all good.
So in the gateway, so let's say if you have like 10, 20 tools in the gateway, what is like your guys' experience in the routing of the right tool? Is it using a local LLM in the gateway, or you use token, you use AI there, or is it more deterministic, like you write logic into the gateway so that you avoid the token cost? Some experiences there, that would be nice.
My experience is short. It's just GraphQL operations, right? Your gateways has a set of persisted queries. Those are the things that can be executed. And it's more that those things should be dynamically returned of like that person has the ability to access these persisted queries. That's like the Apollo GraphQL, like in Apollo MCP server. But.
I'll give a note to it's all context engineering, you know, to the bottom. And I +1 to customizing which tools are available based on user roles and permissions. But people sleep on this. You can change the description of a tool and how it operates based on a user's properties, based on their permissions and roles. So you can have the same tool which does one thing for a admin and another thing for a non-admin based on instructing it how to call the tool. And so with that kind of paradigm, I think just surfacing all of the relevant tools via list tools to the main LLM that's operating makes it really nice for orchestrating it. That said, there are lots of use cases where you want to just do one tool call and have it go and do it yourself. I'll pass to Andrew.
I think those are good high-level optimizations. Funny enough, there's a really cracked AI engineer at Vercel who actually gave a speech about this last week at MCP Dev Summit. I think you were there. He's experimenting with this thing called graph-based tool calling. And it's this concept where you can sort of arrange your tools in a way, or you can optimize the LLM and train a new model and do some fine-tuning layer on it in order to sort of find the dependencies of different tool call chains. So I mean, to your point, it's like you have like this like black box with like 10 to 20 different puzzle pieces, and you want like assemble them in the right way that the inputs and outputs make sense, as well as that there's no duplicate actions and that you're using the right intent for all these. And so in a way, I think that will maybe largely be solved by the model layer as we get more sophisticated models and better algorithms for choosing these tools, including this graph-based approach.
So the way I teach MCP to a lot of people, and I'm gonna, I use the example of a mechanic. And I think when we're talking about tool calls, if you treat a tool call, like if you go to a mechanic and he doesn't have any tools, that's an LLM without any MCP or tools, he's gonna give you all the directions on how to change your oil, but he's not gonna have the tools at his disposal. What we've done with MCP is we've just, MCP version 1.
Version 1, first wave.
Has just dropped all of these tools in a big bin in front of the LLM. And that mechanic is like, okay, I need maybe this one, maybe that one. Now, what we need to do is, a good mechanic is going to have all of the tools organized in a really clear and defined way. And so I love where you talked about definition, like the tool definitions. I think a lot of people are sleeping on those, like the ability to have dynamic tool definitions. But the clear organization is like, this tool does X, and it does not have Y, Z, right? You can say what it can do, but you also need to be very clear about what it can't do. And that way we can make some, we can empower the LLM to do much more powerful things.
Awesome. Well, we're just at time, and it's amazing. I totally agree. AI is really good at understanding graphs, and that's why GraphQL is so great in this space. But I want to thank you, all of our panelists. This has been a fantastic panel. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you all enjoyed getting to bring a little bit of the MCP AI community that's happening in SF to GraphQL Summit. So thank you so much for attending, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.